other thing I think that's amazing is she looks the same. I mean, the face is amazing. We put 2 pigtails on her, and there you go.
Would have liked to have grown a little taller. Stayed the same height, unfortunately.
Well, we have loads.
Good thing they have high heels today.
Now, you didn't start out life as Margaret. You started out as Angela.
Yes, my original name was Angela, but when I did Journey for Margaret, I loved doing the role so much and was so much into that part that I had the courts change my name to Margaret. So I think I was only all of 5 when I did it, so I wouldn't even answer to Angela anymore, so I made that my middle name.
You must have been quite a pistol as a kid.
Yes.
So, now, you didn't start out acting. You started out as a photographer's model with Paul Hess.
Correct. Well, not many people know this, but my mother was a very famous flamenco dancer, and she was with the Cancinos, Rita Hayworth and her father and that whole dance group. And my aunt was the Spanish dancer with Xavier Cugart's orchestra. So I kind of grew up at the Waldorf Astoria. They were doing a big show at the time. And I remember my mother used to, I was very tiny. I was always very tiny. And my mother would sneak me into the hotel because you weren't supposed to have children, the performers, and I'd sleep in a drawer in the room. So I was tiny enough to sleep in the drawer, and the housekeeper would kind of sneak me in too. So I grew up traveling. I traveled all over the world before I was about 3 years old because my mother would dance in Cuba, South America. We were all very adventurous, I must say. So I lived a kind of different life than most child stars and continued to live quite a different life even when I got into pictures at MGM. Because when I would finish a movie, my mother would take me to some exotic place like Morocco, or it was good for the acting. You know, I learned a lot about people and about places, and I think that's one of the things that's very important as an actress, to know many different cultures and many different countries. So, but getting back to how I started, I know you want to ask me.
Well, actually, I mean, your early life was not easy. Your dad died a few months before you were born, and your
Correct.
mother was a single mother then and was working and had to take care of you.
Right. I don't know how she did it because I do admire my mother because she never left me with nannies or nurses. I kind of went with her everywhere and continued to go with her everywhere, even as I did get in movies. And it would have been very easy for her to have, got a nanny or a nurse, but she never did. So I sort of grew up going to a lot of different restaurants because my mother loved restaurants. So I grew up at 21, the Store Club, Chasen's. So it was really a wonderful, wonderful history, and I loved it. I love going to the restaurants and still do. That's one of my favorite hobbies.
How did you get to California?
Well, my mother came out from New York. They were dancing, my aunt was dancing with Cougar. And my mother came to California because she was going to do a show with the Cancinos. And she was having some pictures taken. It's funny how you get into this business really by accident many, many times, because my mother was really concentrating on my aunt's career. And she was having some pictures taken along with my aunt at Paul Hesse, who had a very famous photography studio up on Sunset. And a funny thing is that building is still there and has never been torn down, has never been changed. It looks exactly the same as when Mr. Hesse was a famous photographer. And so my mother was having some pictures taken, and he was doing a cover for Saturday Evening Post, and he was looking for a dog. Surprisingly, I would not have been Margaret O'Brien if it had not been for my dog. Because that's really how I got in pictures. So he was looking for a dog to be on the cover, and my mother didn't have a babysitter and wouldn't leave me with a babysitter. So she brought me along. I was about 2 years old, and the little dog. And of course, since we traveled a lot, we had to be pretty well trained. So the dog was pretty well trained too. And he saw this dog and said, "That's a perfect face I want for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Well, put the baby in with the dog. You know, we'll all take them together." Well, it made the cover, and we made many, many covers for Mr. Hesse after that. And when MGM was casting Journey for Margaret, they were looking all over the world because it was really the part of a little English girl. And of course, I was Irish and Spanish. Not many people know that I have the Spanish side. So, we really didn't think we had a chance. But I really I heard about this little girl in England that had come over to the United States and was in the war, and I really wanted this part in this picture. And I was about 4. And, and I kind of knew what I wanted it for, because I remember my mother took me to see the Santa Claus Christmas parade on Hollywood Boulevard. And I was about 3. And we were standing in the crowd. And I told everybody, I'm going to be a little movie star, and I'm going to ride up with Santa Claus in the Santa Claus Christmas parade. And, they all laughed at everything. And I said, no, really, I'm going to. And, and I did. About 3 years later, I was up sitting next to Santa Claus in the Christmas parade. So it's funny how things can happen. But anyway, my mother took me to MGM, and there were thousands of children wanting this role. But my mother was a very smart lady. And this goes to show that you have to have a little bit of ingenuity. And there was another little girl that also looked the part. We were both very skinny, and they wanted somebody very skinny and, war orphany looking. And she was very, very good look also. But my mother knew that the lady who was the coach at MGM, and this goes to show you how you have to be a little bit smart. Her name was Lillian Burns. And everybody thought she was just the coach at MGM, but my mother knew she was a little bit something more. She could just tell by talking with her. And Lillian was married to George Sidney, the great director who gave us so many wonderful movies like Showboat. And so she was very powerful at MGM at the time. And she liked my mother, and my mother liked her. And we did get to know her. I was also right for the part, too. I mean, you have to be right for the part. You have to be ready for it. But it helped to get that little bit of a push. So I've always said that it's really helpful to know some people in the business. That is a great, great help. So the more people you talk to, the more people you get to know. That's what I try to tell young people, that they have to get out and be seen. You can't sit home and wait for the agent to call, because it's not too often you get that job through the agent. It's through who you happen to have met and where you happen to have been at that time. In fact, it's kind of interesting, and I just want to tell very quickly about how things can happen in this business. A very dear friend of mine who's sitting over there, Randall Malone, and who also does a lot of managing for me, I happened to be doing an appearance somewhere. And he was sitting with me. He's never wanted, he has done theater work and has a wonderful singing voice, but wasn't looking to really do movies and so forth. So didn't have an agent or anybody. So I'm here doing some autographs, and this man comes up and says, would you like to be in a television show? I said, oh, yes, of course, but he meant Randy. So Randy said, oh, get out, we're busy. She has the next autograph person, don't bother us. He said, no, seriously, I'm really legitimate, and I want you to do this television show, which he did. He got the job, did the television show for 3 years, was it? And it was called Single Out on MTV. And now he just did a movie for the same producer. And that's how things can evolve and things can happen, sometimes quite by accident. If Randy hadn't been with me at the show, I hadn't been with my little dog, our lives may have been totally different.
Well, is the story of Babes on Broadway apocryphal, about how you did that bit part before Journey for Margaret and the line that you gave them about, don't send my brother to the electric chair?
That is true. That is true. Well, how that came about is my mother gave me that line. That was not given by the studio. And I was supposed to be this little girl. In fact, I wasn't supposed to have any lines. And my mother had taken me out for this little role. They said, oh, why don't you, take her out for this little, it's just a little bit part. You don't say, anything. And we didn't think anything would come of it. But my mother thought up this wonderful line. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you how it really came about. My uncle was just a teenager, and he got into a little trouble. And so I evolved the line because my mother had to go down to court and the juvenile court and, sign the papers and say he's juvenile, he really didn't do this, blah, blah, blah. So I made up this line, please don't send my brother to the chair. Well, I didn't have a brother. So the studio loved this line. So that was my first line of, please don't send my brother to the chair. And my mother and I thought that up by taking that idea that she had gone down to the juvenile thing, on him. So that's how that evolved. So that's really the first little tiny job. But then after getting Journey for Margaret, I was put under contract at MGM. And of course, my mother was very smart. She realized after I was under contract for a while and had made several starring pictures, that the studio, of course, Mr. Mayer, didn't want to pay you any money, He never did. As a matter of fact, he could cry better than I could when it came to money. He could. And you'd have to walk into his office, and it was very inhibiting because he would have a great big chair, and he'd put you in a little chair. Now, my mother did all this. I didn't. Thank goodness I wasn't old enough. But she'd have to walk in. She'd be in the little chair. He'd be in the big chair. And he'd start crying when you'd ask for money. Well, this was when I was going to do Meet Me in St. Louis, which I almost didn't do, as a matter of fact, because my mother said, well, look, Mr. Mayer, I don't know how long my daughter's career is going to go. And, if she's not going to make enough money, to make it worthwhile, but I'll just take her somewhere else. I have my dancing career, and we're gone. And my mother was a bit of a gypsy. So she disappeared into New York. And in those days, they would have what you call lookalikes. I don't know if you know that, but they had the lookalikes. They'd have a lookalike Clark Gable. James Craig was the lookalike Clark Gable that I did Our Vines of Tender Grapes with. And the lookalike would never quite get going in their career because they were held back by the studio. But they were held up to the star to keep them in line because they'd say, oh, we're going to put in James Craig. My aunt was the lookalike for Lucille Bremer, which really stopped her career. And they had a lookalike, the little girl that was also up for Journey for Margaret was my lookalike. So they told her family that she was going to be in Meet Me in St. Louis. And they got her costumes together and everything. And this was really quite sad, and they don't do this anymore. Thanks that the Guild is even stronger than ever. But her family was all excited, and she was going to be a star. And then, of course, the studio found us, brought me back, and always had the intention of coming up with the money that my mother asked for. Well, then they had to tell this little girl that she was not going to be in the movie, which really ruined her family's life. Her father was a lighting man on the set of Meet Me in St. Louis, and he tried to drop a light on me. He got so mental over this and had to have some psychiatric help, and that was not a nice thing that the studios used to do, which is not done anymore. So there were pros and cons and good and bad things compared to studio of yesterday to the studios of today. It's awfully difficult for young people today because it's sort of job by job. There, at least, when you were under contract, you had everything taken care of for you. You had your publicity people. You had the studio personnel who were sort of your bodyguards. Where today, an actress has to hire a lot of these people themselves and have these entourages, which eat up a lot of the money. Even though they make more than we did, you still don't come away with more, unless you're the 4 or 5, top paid, which most actors are not. So it's as difficult as it was then. You had a little bit more protection once you were under contract, which was nice. They were like a family.
Now, were you aware when you were working with people like Charles Lawton and Robert Young and Leon Ames and Mary Astor, the quality of person you were working with, was this something that was intimidating to you, or these were just people and you were just acting with them?
Well, no, it really wasn't intimidating because I really took my job seriously. When I'd leave a set, I would be another little girl. I had my friends. My mother saw that I had friends and a normal life. But when I was at the studio, it was a job to me, and I had to do well. A lot of people were depending on me. I mean, it didn't make me nervous or upset or mental or anything, but I felt that I did have a duty to my job and my work, and I wanted to do it the best I could. Well, I think one of the reasons that Charles Laughton was one of my favorites was that he treated me like a grown-up actress. And we'd try to steal each other's scenes. And he'd go to Robert Young and he'd cry and he'd say, "Do you think she's stealing my scene? Maybe she's a witch." And and Robert Young would say, "Oh, you have this wonderful costume. You fly in as the ghost. I don't have anything but a soldier's uniform, so don't worry about it." And then I'd try to steal his scene, and we had a wonderful time, and we became just wonderful friends, just great friends, and I admired him so much. And he was wonderful, wonderful to work with, as was Lionel Barrymore. Lionel Barrymore was like a grandfather to me.
Now, did he give you a family heirloom, a pin that the women in his family wore for opening nights, and he felt you deserved it?
He did. Well, I'll tell you what happened.
Do you still
one
have
day.
it?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what happened, which is sad. But Lionel Barrymore and I became great friends. He was like a grandfather to me. But he was old when I worked with him, and he'd like to nap between takes. Well, there was a prop piano on the set, but it played it would play, and I didn't know how to play the piano, and I would sit down and plunk on this piano. Well, that really annoyed Lionel Barrymore. So one day he had the prop man tape up this piano. So I came in to sit down to play and no sounds coming out. Well, I cried and I felt terrible. My concert career was over. And then Lionel Barrymore felt so badly that he had done this that he used to make me these wonderful rag dolls. And he made gorgeous rag dolls. So I had about 7 dolls. And then when we finished the movie together, he said he had been waiting for an actress to give this pin to, and it had been a pin that belonged to the women in his family. And every time they'd appear on opening night in a new show in the theater, they would wear this pin for good luck. And it was sapphires and pearls. And he had waited for somebody to give it to that would be worthy of this pin. And he gave it to me. So that was, I just loved it. Just loved this pin. But as children, I was still, even though I was in a very grown-up business, I was still a child. And Natalie Wood and I were at the beach one day, and I wore this pin into the ocean, pinned on my bathing suit, and I lost it. But Natalie was very sweet. She took the blame, and she told my mother that I had let her pin it on her bathing suit, and she was the one that lost it. So I was forever grateful to her, but I'll never get over losing that wonderful pin. It was wonderful. But everybody that I worked with was just absolutely, wonderful. Robert Young, I did so many movies and television things with Robert Young, and he really was like Father Knows Best. He was somebody you could really go to and was just so sweet. And I saw him in his later years, too. We remained very dear, dear friends. And everybody, Jimmy Durante, he was fabulous to work with, too. There was just one that was difficult. And he did not like children, and it was a difficult time when I made Bad Bascom. His name was Wallace Berry. And we were making Bad Bascom in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And for people who work longer hours, they would have the hot lunches and for the children, and then they'd have sandwiches for the people who weren't, the extras and people who weren't going to be on the set as long. Well, Wallace Berry would come and steal my hot lunch. And then my mother would go over and steal it back from him. So he didn't really get away with it, but they had to put blocks between us so that he wouldn't pinch me. And I was a nice little girl. I didn't tell, if somebody was pinching me. I tried to be strong and be a trooper. But they found out about it, so they'd put the blocks between us. But he was a wonderful actor because he certainly looked like he loved me all to death in the movie. But during sometimes when I wasn't doing a scene, they would run some movies for me. And so they would run a lot of Vivien Leigh movies. And of course, she wasn't on the lot at the time. And she was my very favorite actress. And the only one I mean, every day I saw Clark Gable and Lana Turner, but the one person that I wanted to meet and have their autograph was Vivien Leigh. And so finally, when I was about 11, I was in England, and the studio arranged for me to have tea with Vivien Leigh while she was doing Caesar and Cleopatra and Antony and Cleopatra. And I was just in awe. I mean, I was just so nervous. So they brought me backstage, and I ran up to Vivien Leigh and said, "Oh, could I please have your autograph, Miss Leigh?" And Laurence Olivier came in, and he said, "Well, don't you want my autograph too?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not interested in your autograph. I just want Vivien Leigh." So now today, I wish that I had Laurence Olivier's autograph. And then the other one that I wanted an autograph, and I sort of had a little crush on, and he wasn't at the studio either, was Burt Lancaster. So he's responsible that I have straight teeth today because we had the same dentist. And that's how my mother would get me to go to the dentist, because between films I'd have to have the braces on, which was really very difficult. And then when I do a film, they'd have to take them off and then put them back on again. So I'd have to go through this routine, and I really had it. But with Burt Lancaster sitting in the office, I got through it, and so I have straight teeth.
Now, by the time you were 15, you had done 27 films.
That's right.
That's an amazing amount of work.
And then after that, as contracts were ending at the studio, television was coming in, and my mother always saw into the future. MGM had offered several of us to stay under contract, but at reduced salaries till the studio could get, because they were afraid of television, but we wouldn't have been allowed to do television. And my mother said, "No, definitely not. I want her to know all the different facets of the business." So around 10 years old, I started in plays too. I did Child of the Morning on Broadway for Claire Booth Luce. So people don't realize that I've been in theater also since I've been 10 years old and done many, many tours. I was in the national company of Thousand Clowns, worked with Jason Robards, and then went with the same little boy that was in the movie, who was
Barry Gordon.
Barry Gordon.
Right, president
who
of SAG.
was president of the Guild for a while there. A very, very wonderful child actor to work with. And Dane Clark took over for Jason Robards. And then I was in the national company of Barefoot in the Park. And Pat Carroll was my mother, then Ann Southern, and then Virginia Mayo. So I've done several very long, tours. But television was wonderful and so exciting. And I think that was a wonderful, wonderful training ground because there were so many different directors and you got a chance to play so many different characters. They had matinee theater, Albert McCleary, which was an hour every day. And of course you had to know all the lines. I did one of my favorite shows with Jack Lemmon and Gladys Cooper. He was sort of a Jack the Ripper, which was a very different part for Jack Lemmon, and I was his wife, who he kills in the show. And so that was just a wonderful experience. How we did those live, because it was part theater, part television, part movies. I don't know if I could do that today. I mean, you had to really, how those prop men, how you changed costumes, how everything sort of worked out. I don't know how they did it, but it was an exciting time.
Did you have any formal training? Or it was all on the job?
No, most of my training actually, my mother coached me at times, but mainly I learned from the different directors. I had wonderful directors, Mervyn LeRoy, who was just fabulous. Roy Rowland, Lillian George Sidney's. Her husband would give me pointers, on the lot. So I really learned from some wonderful, wonderful George Cukor, whom I worked with in later life. I had done a test for him, but I was too young for the picture. And then he took me for Heller in Pink Tights with Sophia Loren. And he was one of my favorite directors. And all of the television directors were just fantastic, just wonderful. I know on Matinee Theater, Albert McCleary got together a tour of John Barrymore Jr. and I doing Romeo and Juliet. Of course, that's Drew's father, it was Drew's father's. And he was so handsome and wonderful at the time. And that was a wonderful experience. So all through my career, I've been very fortunate in learning from many different directors in many different phases of the business.
Did your mother act as your manager and your agent, or how did that work?
Well, in those days, when you were under contract to a studio, they appointed the agent. So the agent was for the studio, not for the actor. And so my mother would, have to oversee the agent. But my mother was never a pushy stage mother. I mean, she had always said to me, anytime I don't want to do it, we'll just leave. She was very much a free spirit. And in fact, she was quite attractive, sort of looked like Hedy Lamarr, and with the Spanish and the exotic Latin looks. And Mr. Mayer had asked my mother to marry him at one time, which he turned him down. But all was well and good. He forgave her.
Did he think you worked free then?
No, he was going to give $1 million on the child.
Whoa.
On if the woman had a child. And then after my mother turned him down, he met another lady. And her daughter got the $1 million. But that was fine with us because, my mother believed that you married for love. And she was a very independent woman, too. She was sort of, because in the 40s, she was an interesting person. It was sort of like living with Auntie Mame, which was really exciting. And she would do things way ahead of what women would do in the 40s, like go to restaurants alone, go to and famous restaurants. I would always be with her, but it would be a woman alone with her child, and they treated her beautifully. She learned to walk in any restaurant in the world, and she taught me that. I have no trouble. I love going to places and seeing people, sitting at a table, many times by myself, and just watching people and enjoying people and talking with people. And I learned many different things by doing that, by going to restaurants all over the world. And I'm very adventurous. I've lived in Peru for 4 years and went into the tombs, brought back a lot of pre-Columbian art.
I understand you lecture about pre-Columbian art.
And I lecture on many of the ships about pre-Columbian art. And I recently was in Africa, met a Maasai warrior, went into his village. He gave me his club that he clubs the lions with, so they come out of the bush, things like that. So my mother taught me to be adventurous. And she did many things a woman would not do alone, and had to raise a child really alone in the 40s, which was very difficult. It's not as difficult today, but she was sort of like a lady suffragette, I guess, of the 40s. So it was an exciting life, and she didn't bow to the studios at all, but was not a stage mother and did not interfere on the set. And that's why they respected her and liked her very much. She would stand back, and if she had something to tell me, she would tell me, off the set, because that wasn't, the place for.
And she managed your money well.
I managed my money well. And I think the word stage mother has come about because the studios, they like my mother, but they didn't like most mothers because some of them would be too pushy, yes. But they were protecting their child. And the studio was for the studio, let's face it. So if it wasn't for the school teachers and the mothers, they hated the school teachers too. But luckily I came in at a time, and this was after some of Judy's experiences in the 30s, where they really didn't have the overseeing like they had in the 40s. And that school teacher was on the set with you all the time, and if you didn't get A's in school, they would just take you right out of film. And many a times I wanted to finish a scene because it might have been a crying scene and I didn't want to come back in the morning, have to cry again. But the school teacher would, once it was 6 o'clock, you were out of that studio, and it might cost that studio thousands of dollars just to cut that scene and have to set up again in the morning. And I would have rather finished, but they were right. They were watching out, for the child. And sometimes, I thought they were a little too militant at the time, but I really respect them now. And we did get a good education, and that's very important.
Your mother died when you were 21.
Correct.
And do you think that affected your career at all?
No, we were very close, but I was mature enough to go on, and I continued doing theater and never really stopped working. Still work, I just did the film on Natalie Wood for Peter Bogdanovich that's going to be coming out, which is going to be rather interesting because it's half documentary, half they have an actress playing me and an actress playing her. When we were teenagers, how we used to sneak out of the theater. And my mother thought we were going to the movies, but we were really sneaking off to see James Dean at the teenage hot spot across the street, So they have everything in this film, really delved into her life, all her old boyfriends, people she knew as teenagers. So it's going to be an interesting film. But I like to sort of pick and choose today because, to tell you the truth, I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. all the time. I think that's why I love theater, because you go to work at night, and I'm sort of a night person. So,
you have a daughter.
I have a very beautiful daughter.
And
yes.
Is she an actress?
No, my daughter is. She's a psychologist. I mean, she's still in college. She's young, and she's beautiful. I took her to Liza's wedding, and everybody thought she was Britney Spears because she looks just like Britney Spears. But she's a psychologist, and she works with troubled teenagers. So, because it's very difficult for teenagers today, I think more difficult than when I was growing up in films. And it's not films. I think a lot of times show business is blamed for teenage problems. It's just hard for teenagers today. My daughter went through some hard times that we had to, send her to a school in Provo, Utah that really lays down the law, because times are difficult. And I think they see more on TV today. Children grow up much faster than I grew up. And that's hard for kids in movies. I think the one thing that's hard for kids in movies is that when I was playing children's roles, they were children's roles. Mm-hmm. They weren't children being in grown-up situations. And you have to grow up very fast today, and it's difficult, it's hard.
But even when you were growing up, so many of the child actors had so many problems afterward. You have seemed to bridged all of that and have maintained your privacy when you've needed to, and yet continue to work and have been financially comfortable. What is the difference in how you did it than even your contemporaries?
Well, there's two different sides. There's a few that had some problems, but then there's many that didn't. She was before me, but I became friends with Jane Withers because we like antiques, and I buy a lot of antiques from her because she goes to all the auctions.
Dolls.
Dolls.
Lots of dolls.
Yes, because she loved it, and she's such a happy person, has a wonderful life. I mean, just loves everybody. Shirley Temple has had a wonderful life. Many of them came through, beautifully, and then there's some that did not. I think a lot of it has to do with your parents. I think parents are very important in this business. I think you never let the studio take over. I think you have to watch out for your child, make sure they want to do it. I remember and I learned from this because my mother was so good about if I wanted to do it or not do it, it had to be me, because it doesn't work otherwise. I know I took my daughter to ice skating when she was about 7, and she was wonderful at it. She was starting to win some prizes and everything, and I was going, isn't she wonderful? Isn't she great? You know. And then I saw the other mothers there, and this was worse than movies. They were really bad. I mean, I saw one just push her child out there, smack her child because she didn't do a twirl right. And then my daughter came to me and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, oh, but you're so good at it. And she didn't want to tell me till several years later, but her teacher was pinching her and bruising her arm and everything if she didn't do right. So that's why you have to be very, very careful. And my mother was very protective because you have to be, because I didn't even know this was happening. When she said, I don't want to do it, I said, fine, you don't want to do it, that's it. Because if you lose the enjoyment of it, then it's not good for you anymore. But you can also keep your privacy if you want to keep your privacy. I know today it's more difficult because they have zoom lenses and they have paparazzi and everything, but we did too. I mean, we'd go on some of these appearances in New York and there'd be, thousands of fans, people pulling your clothes. And I mean, I think today some of the actors overreact just a little bit. You're not going to get hurt. You just say, please don't do that. And you're sweet and you go ahead and they leave you alone. I think sometimes they get overreacting. Plus, I have a pet peeve today that they pull away from their fans. They start it because they say, no, and pull the bag over the head and the bodyguards push you away. These are your fans. These are the people that are going to see your movies. And if you're sweet and say, they're rushing me in, I can't talk right now, I'll hope to see you later, and you're sweet, the fans will be sweet too. If you do I want to be alone too much, then that's when it gets out of hand. And you must be nice to your fans, and you must be available to your fans. And I think some of the actors overreact with too many bodyguards that aren't necessary. Now, if you're, a rock star that's got thousands that are, you need a bodyguard. But I've seen some in a restaurant, and one little fan comes up and says, may I have an autograph? And the bodyguard pushes them away, I think that's overreacting and a bit much. And I think we have to kind of find a happy medium there. And I think that's why the paparazzi now is getting more bold, because the more you do that, if you say, okay, I'll give you the story, this is it, take the picture of my child, bye, they'll leave.
What do you think of children who achieve star status and who play it to the hilt? One story that was related to us in a Conversations, actually, a child star who shall remain nameless, because we do tape this, is on a weekly series and is too young to drive, so a limo picks this child up to go to the set every day.
It's ridiculous.
And when the new season started, this child, not the parent now, the child called the producer and said, I don't want a Lincoln Town Car anymore. I'm allergic to the leather. I want a Mercedes.
Oh, that's outrageous. Outrageous.
Well, guess what they did? They got him the Mercedes.
Outrageous. This isn't only just in the movies, though. When my daughter was going to a prom, this was a junior prom, they were like 13. I saw a little girl sitting on the curb in her little prom dress, and I said to Mara, why is she just sitting there, kind of dejected? I mean, where are her parents? Because everybody was being picked up. And Mara said, very matter-of-factly, oh, she's just waiting for her limo. Well, then this big limo comes up, like this stretch limo with all the lights blinking, and this little girl gets in it. No mother, no parents. So I think it also happens outside of the business. But that's outrageous, and whoever are the parents should not do that. And I have another incident, which I'm going to not tell who it is, what it is, but I was with an actress who's a very good actress and had her child with her, and we were at a luncheon. And there was another little actress who was doing some TV at the time. Haven't seen her anymore, because this is a very up and down business. So you have to be nice to people, because you never know who you're going to meet when you're going down or coming up. That was what my mother always taught me. Right. And this little actress was with her parents, and this very good actress, who was on a series, by the way, she's about 30, brought her little girl over and said, oh, she would love to have your autograph to this little girl. And the little girl said, I don't give anybody autographs. You get away. I don't give autographs. And I just thought, I couldn't. Good thing I was in the background. I didn't get there soon enough, or I would have maybe opened my big mouth, which I shouldn't have. But that's terrible. And now this little girl isn't doing anything. So it's very important to be nice to people and to be nice to your fans, and to know that this is a very unpredictable business, and especially today, because so much of it depends on the money and corporations. You don't have the head of studios who had more of an artistic, and this is corporate now, a lot of it. So you can be up one minute and down the next. So that's why it is very important to, have your privacy, and you don't have to be overly friendly, but you have to be nice to people, because it really pays in the end when you want to do something again. And you can go down. It is very fleeting. So that's something my mother always taught me, that just be a nice person and enjoy life. And if that picture comes along, fine. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So you have to have a separate life. I try to tell young people, do finish school. Try to go to college. Have another little business in mind, or a little enterprise, because this is a fleeting business, and especially for women. So there'll come a day when, you may not be married and you want to do something else. It's always good to have something else. You don't put all your eggs in one basket, and especially not in this business.
Now, for a child, how do you handle the transition? Here you are, from the time you were 3 to the time you were about 15, working steadily, a major star, working with every big name in the business, having the first Academy Award for a special young actress for Meet Me in St. Louis, and then you become a teenager.
Well, I was kind of lucky when I became a teenager, because that's when television was coming in. So I did have somewhere to go. And I really kind of never stopped working. There were transitions, and it was hard not being under a studio, and you had to do it job by job. I was very lucky that I would get television shows after television shows, and then I did a lot of theater. So I really kept working, but there's always a transition. I mean, let's face it, growing up isn't easy. At times it's not easy for anyone, because you're becoming your own person, and especially in this business, because you were a lot of things that everybody else wanted you to be, and you have to learn to be your own person. And that's why it's important to meet many different people, people from different countries, people with different interests, not just to talk about the movies. You have to have interests in many things. I mean, I love doing many things. I love history. I love what's going on in the world. So you can't just know lines and just know movies. You have to be aware of what's going on around you. And I think when you're aware of what's going on around you, it's always exciting, and you're always busy, and you're never bored when you're between that movie. Because there are going to be times you're not making a movie, and your life can't end then. So I think it's very important to go to school and learn about other people, other places, other things to do. And it's all more wonderful when you're working.
You mention Natalie Wood quite often, but what about other friendships? I mean, people that you worked with over the years, have you been able to maintain relationships with them is there a closeness because you grew up in the same era, experienced the same things, or are most of your friends now out of the business?
Well, as a child, it's interesting because most of my friends were not in the business. They were a little girl who lived next door to me, people I'd meet, from other countries when my mother and I lived in other countries. But I had some children that were in the business that were friends of mine. And as I grew up, it's the same way today. I have friends who are not at all in the business. They're in many different phases of life, and still people who are friends in the business. I see many times, as I say, Jane Withers, because we like antiques. I see Ann Miller, Debbie Reynolds, Esther Williams. We go to many. I enjoy going to some of the charity dinners and different things where we all get together and we see each other. Going to Liza's wedding was fun because I saw a lot of people I hadn't seen in,
Now you can go to the divorce.
Now I can go to the divorce, yes. But it was fun for us.
Easy come, easy go.
But it was a fun evening.
I'll bet.
I enjoyed it. Saw a lot of people that I hadn't seen for a while. So that was.
Now tell me,
nice.
was Peter Lawford as gorgeous as we all thought he was growing up?
Peter Lawford was very handsome, and that was kind of fun making Little Women. But I was kind of the younger one.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time making Little Women.
But he wasn't.
That's true. I just couldn't resist that one.
But I was kind of the little one on the set. And I had always been friends with Elizabeth, and I loved her chipmunks and all of that. But I didn't realize she'd grown up in a kind of way from me a little bit. And then, of course, Peter Lawford came on the set. And all of the girls loved Peter Lawford. So they'd sort of, each one would disappear into the dressing room. And I'd be so jealous I couldn't play with the chipmunks. And Peter Lawford wasn't interested in me. So, but I weathered the storm. Thought someday I'll grow up. But then when I grew up, Peter Lawford was oldish. So what could I do?
Before we go to questions from the audience, do you want to talk a little bit about the memorabilia that you've brought?
Yes, what's kind of interesting behind me is that I was one of the first actresses to do products. Again, my mother was smart. They did not have products. Most actresses were not allowed to do anything outside of the studio. In fact, you couldn't even make a picture at another studio unless it was approved by Mr. Mayer. So the only picture I made that wasn't at MGM was Jane Eyre for Fox, because that was something that Mr. Mayer said was all right for me to do. So getting products was really unusual in those days. But again, my mother said, we're off to New York or somewhere, and he relented and let me do these products. So they had the Margaret O'Brien doll. That's Madame Alexander. That's the original one that I still kept.
Randy, you want to help with these things?
So I'll let
ahead.
Randy, do you want to get up
Go
and
ahead,
sort of show those
show
a little bit so that I wrote a book.
These actually are just a few of the Margaret O'Brien products, and she was largely responsible for film star endorsements throughout the 1940s, and she actually began a lot of film stars saying, well, can we make extra money? And so you started it. And in all the MGM books, it says, my gosh, Margaret O'Brien had more products than anyone previous or since. There was the Margaret, this was, Madame Alexander designed this especially for Margaret. It was the biggest seller at Alexander Doss from 1942 to 1954. And this is her Margaret O'Brien doll. This is the Margaret O'Brien muff for little girls with her face on it.
How
And it's
cute is that?
It's a real fur muff. And here's this is actually the original ad for it. These were the Margaret O'Brien sweaters, and she's left the plastic on this. I was going to take it off, but she could have me. But you can see that there were little girl sweaters. There were also little girl dresses, and there were little girl hats and shoes and gloves, and these were all Margaret's. These are Margaret O'Brien shoes. Here's an advertisement for it. and the shoes, but she wore these in Little Women.
Oh.
And they're
In
signed
Little Women?
I'm
No,
sorry,
no, this was
Lost
earlier,
Angels.
Lost
Oh,
Angels.
I was gonna say,
Right.
boy.
No, I was a little bigger.
Yes.
Not big enough for Peter Lawford, but a little bit.
These are the gloves, and everything has a tag. These are actually Margaret O'Brien gloves, and I don't know if you ever wore these. Or this is Keith, though.
No, I think I just took my picture with those.
Took your picture
Yeah.
of those. But I have a picture of her wearing these gloves.
Oh.
Also, and that hat. But there were just so many items.
And records, a lot of
A
records.
lot of records. These were, if I may be so bold, Miss O'Brien, these were panty drawers for little girls. And they say panties on there. That's Margaret's picture. Oh, I'm opening the drawers here. This is where you would, I guess this is where you did it. But the
Were they the day of the
Yes.
week panties that we
Yes,
used to have?
they were.
Remember? Yes.
Isn't that amazing? Going through her archive, you could actually spend weeks, and I would just stand there with my mouth open. I couldn't believe it. These were there were Margaret O'Brien comic books and game books. This is just one of them. There were many. There were a lot of comic books.
A lot of comic
These were
books.
games. There were Margaret O'Brien coloring books. I bought the paint book because there were so many coloring books. I thought this was beautiful.
Oh, that is beautiful.
And of course, there were lots of paper dolls. I chose two. Aren't these cool? Look at these.
Whoa.
Remember paper dolls? I really like this one. So
That's.
there were you did a lot of record albums.
Oh, a lot of record albums,
Which
yeah.
are children's stories. This is Sleeping Beauty, and this is Beauty and the Beast and Princess and the Pea. So, and there were lots of them. Now these were all done for Capitol, and I actually read and researched it. These were all big sellers too.
Those were big sellers.
This is, Goldilocks and Three
So these
Bears.
are all collectibles now, I
Oh,
assume.
big collectibles. Actually, they're worth more now than when you
I can
bought them
imagine,
then,
yes.
of course.
Let's go down to Mexico.
That's one that my mother organized, where I played a little Mexican girl and myself. I played both parts, and it was a visit to Mexico, sort of an adventure.
I love this one here. This is
tape.
Stories for Children, and it's Margaret O'Brien and the Three Billy Goats Gruff. And you open these up, and they actually, it's her telling stories.
That was a big seller, this one.
Well, apparently they all were. Now this, I got to share this with you. And I'm going to say, Margaret O'Brien's favorite songbooks and stories. This was a huge seller for the studio too. MGM, that you had Margaret O'Brien dresses, hats, and school supplies. And this was considered one of the school supplies because they used this to teach students songs, traditional American songs, which was so neat. These are Margaret O'Brien scarves. Here's a little ad. And here's the scarves. I'd love to have one of these. Isn't that neat? There's a picture, and here's the ad, the original 1940s ad. And these are about, I guess, something about some of the movies that you did that put those on records.
Yes, that was
This is
Unfinished Dance.
I saw the Meet Me in St. Louis and the Canterville Ghost, and I just chose this one because I thought it was a neat cover.
And in that one, I did all my own dancing. Nobody, did any stunt work for me.
Had you had ballet training?
Not really ballet. I had always grown up in a dancing family, but I learned it in like
Just for that.
3 weeks or
Well, I
something.
understand you also became a roller skater for a
Yes.
film.
Well, in fact,
Yes.
the man who was with the Ballet Russe wanted me to give up
Cute she was.
film and be a ballet dancer. But my mother knew what a hard life a dancer's life is, and it doesn't last that long, so I never did go.
But your mother was a famous Vigo dancer.
Yes.
When I was in a trophy room one time, there's this huge award from the Chicago,
Dancers Society.
and I said, that is the neatest award, and it was a picture of you as a ballerina, so
Right.
you could have gone on to do that too. Glad you didn't.
Glad I didn't either.
This right here, these were Margaret O'Brien cards. There were lots of them for Easter and for holidays and Thanksgiving. Isn't that neat? This one looks
beautiful.
like an Easter card. These right here were Margaret O'Brien Christmas decorations right here by F&D, the dot company. So I thought that was cool. And here's the book that she wrote called My Diary. Now this was a #1 seller for many, many months on the New York bestseller list. And you wrote this yourself?
I wrote that myself about every day, at the studio.
How old
in
were
my
you when you
diary.
wrote it?
I was about 8 to 9 when I wrote that.
Did you do the illustrations too? If you can ever get a hold of
I
one of
did
these,
the
they're so neat.
illustrations.
And this was her second book. The first one was called Memoirs. And
That's right there. Didn't have a lot of memoirs.
At 7?
That's why it's a little book.
Well, it's 3 pages long. This was Margaret O'Brien hair ribbons.
Oh.
So,
Now, are you going to write another book?
People have asked me to write a book, about my life, but I don't like doing the private, the tell-all,
talk her into it. She
so
needs
so
to
to
do
speak. But I do have a project in mind that's a little bit different, which I won't say yet. Hope you'll buy it when it comes out. But it's not going to be a tell-all type thing.
But you
It's
have
different.
kept your private life very private.
I don't
you-
kind of believe in, my diary and those was like a child, writing about every day. But I really don't want to do.
But you don't talk about your
tell-all of my
marriages, and you
life.
don't talk
No.
about.
No, that's a private thing to me, and I'll forego that.
This is her private pen right here. This was by Alexander also.
Right.
It's a Margaret O'Brien face.
How cute.
And these were Margaret O'Brien bookmarks. And again, this was your school paper. I thought this was cool. Margaret O'Brien Candy Kitchen. And here's her original.
I'll tell you who bought one of the candy kitchens, spent a lot for that candy kitchen, was Michael Jackson. So he has one of the candy kitchens, and he spent a fortune. I couldn't afford to buy the candy kitchen today.
This was her very own raspberry flavor. It was how to make candy. And it was Margaret O'Brien candy. There are also Margaret O'Brien jewelry and cosmetics.
Well, they really did merchandise the heck out of you,
They
didn't
did.
they?
Oh, yes, they did. And then the hats, which are interesting because I could still fit in the hats. My head size has not grown. I can wear my hat from Music for Millions that I wore in the film, or from Lost Angel. It still fits.
Let's see. We're going to make her try. These were Margaret O'Brien cosmetics,
Correct.
which we actually brought some of the cosmetics. Which is very, very interesting. This is the hat she wore in Music for Millions.
Music for Millions.
And in Thousandth Cheer. Here's a picture of her with Red Skelton from Thousandth Cheer. Her mother designed this hat for her to wear. And this is also from Music for Millions.
Well, my mother had many talents. She would design some of the, and then the studio would think it would look good, for the film, and I'd wear it in the film. So
These are the Margaret O'Brien vases. Can you imagine from the 40s? And this is the hat she wore in Lost Angel, but it also was a commercial item
correct.
that they designed from Lost Angel, and they sold a lot of these. And I wish I could have brought it. I didn't see it. It was the large Margaret O'Brien hat ad with all of all the different hats.
Now, of course, in those days, you made very good money. You don't make what they make in endorsements today, but for that time, it was a lot of money. In fact, I made more money with these endorsements than I made at MGM. And I was the top salaried at MGM. So
that tells you.
That tells you what endorsements do.
I'm not going to go on. Are you going to leave these here for the folks?
Yes, we'll leave
They
them
can look
here
at
for a
that.
while.
This is the last thing I just want to show them because I think this is really neat. This is the scene from Meet Me in St. Louis, which Margaret, as you said, received the Oscar, the first one to receive that. And this is the hat that Judy Garland gave her when they
Doing
finished
that
the movie.
number.
This is Judy holding it. And what this was the If You Like Me Like I Like You
Yes,
number,
that
where Judy taught you the dance
Correct.
and the song. So here's this.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And by the way, Judy was wonderful to work with.
Now we'll let you answer some questions
All
from
right.
the audience. From Maura Kay. How did it feel to be part of such a classic movie as Meet Me in St. Louis, especially at such a young age?
Well, when you start out to make a movie, you don't realize it's going to be a classic. You always, each movie you do, you hope it's going to be good. Some of them turn out, some of them don't. But the wonderful thing about Meet Me in St. Louis was that everybody felt like a family. And I think that's what made the movie, because we were supposed to be a very close-knit family. And it really showed that turn of the century. And everything was authentic. Vincent Minnelli, he did the sets. He really did the sets. He would go out and hunt for the antiques. He really knew about that period in history. And the chandeliers, the doorknobs, the clothes. He would see everything. He would oversee everything. And he was wonderful to work with, a very gentle, wonderful director. And this was a very happy time for Judy because they were going together. And at the time they were engaged. And he was wonderful with her. He saw that she had enough rest. and she was never tired or overworked. And she really enjoyed making this and really had a wonderful time. And we all loved each other. And I think that's what really brought that family together, that turn of the century family. So.
And this is from Aria Noel Curzon, who is herself a young performer. First of all, she says, I'd like to thank you so much for gracing us with your presence tonight. My question is, what charities are you involved in? Also, what is your key, your philosophy, to being such an amazing actor? Thank you.
Well, I'm involved in many charities, but mainly the AIDS Foundation. I was chairman for the Sacramento AIDS Foundation, so I do a lot for AIDS. And that's my primary, charity and interest. And I think being an actress it's a wonderful life. I mean, it's a very happy life. I love working. It's always different. It's never boring. Each movie is different. Each television show is different. You get a chance to meet many different types of people. It's work, but it's also great enjoyment. And I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I mean, I'm very happy with my life and how my life has gone. And I often wonder what it would have been like if I hadn't gone with my little dog that day. It might have been very different. I think I always would have lived an exciting life because, as I said before I was in movies, my mother kind of led an exciting life. So we probably would have been in some form of show business. Maybe I would have been a dancer and gone on and, worked in different shows.
The family
like
tradition.
The family tradition.
This is from Tina DeMarco. How was it to work with Charles Laughton and Robert Young as a child in Ghost of Canterbury?
Well, that was one of my favorite movies. Robert Young was fantastic to work with. So was, as I say, Charles Laughton was one of my favorites because he and I really talked like adults, and he treated me like an adult, and we were each out to get the best acting in that scene. So I have great memories, and of course I'd worked with Mr. Young before in Journey for Margaret. So he sort of acted like the father that I didn't have. So I loved doing Canterville Ghost. That was one of my favorites.
From Edwin McCready. I was always impressed with how in films you always spoke more like a grown-up than a child. Did you always feel older as a child?
I think I was always kind of grown up as a child because leading sort of a different type of life, although I had other friends that were children and everything. And I can remember back saying some things. Yeah, I never liked birthdays. Never liked birthday parties. My mother would try to give me a birthday party, and I hated birthday parties. And I would always say, you're not going to give me a birthday party, because and this was when I was like 8 or 9, because then I'm going to get older, and getting older won't be fun, and I don't want to get older, and I want to stay on this earth as long as I possibly can, and that means each year is shorter. Isn't it funny? As a kid, I would say things like that. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't that, profound or anything, but
it's quite profound.
Yes, and I would do this at, like about 6, 7 years old.
From Virginia Morrison. Of all the work you've done, what are you most pleased with and why?
Of all the work I've done, I think some of the actually TV things where I played some very, very different roles. And I love doing 1,000 Clowns. That was one of my favorites. And
Played Sandy in 1,000.
Yes. And I think, that was one of the hardest crime scenes because that was every night. That wasn't, before the camera where you can get in the mood and so forth. But that was every night. And it was funny. The girl was saying funny lines, but had to really cry or the scene didn't work. So I think that was one of the more challenging and more difficult acting I ever had. And many people have asked me how they got me to cry and meet me in St. Louis and so forth. And I think even Vincent Minnelli, I don't know why he wrote this in his book, he had said, that they had said my dog had been killed or something. But my mother never would have allowed that. And I was having trouble crying during the snowman scene. And how my mother got me to cry was that June Allison and I were in competition at MGM, because she cried in a lot of her films. And June and I were known as the Town Criers of MGM. So we were sort of in a contest of who was the best. And my mother came up to me and said, well, maybe I better have the makeup man put false tears on your face. But of course, June is such a great, great actress that she'll always cry real tears. And then I just really started crying. So. That was the secret to that scene in Amy in St. Louis.
Michelle Sheehy, did you enjoy working with Edward G. Robinson?
Edward G. Robinson was another great, wonderful person to work with. He was just fantastic. And actually, Our Vines of Tender Grapes was one of his favorite films because it was a total departure for him. And he was wonderful in it. He was such a wonderful actor. And that film hasn't been shown a lot because that was written by Dalton Trumbo, who during the McCarthy era was banished from Hollywood and was such a great writer. I think they're starting to show it more now. And my mother was never afraid of anything. I mean, I remember we saw them off on the train, and the studio was saying, oh, you can't go say goodbye to Dalton Trumbo. And my mother said, well, they're friends of ours, We're not going to turn our backs just because, all this came up. And so I admired her for that. And he was a wonderful writer, and I really appreciate having been in a film that he had written. So.
From Ray Jarris, you're still active in film. What problems, if any, do you have regarding age?
Well, I think, as all of the actresses over 40 have said in this business, it is difficult for actresses, much more difficult than for actors. And that is a shame, because there could be wonderful parts, for women who are older. But I think you just have to keep working and taking an interest in everything. And, when something comes along that seems like you really want to do, just do it, and go out and keep looking for good scripts for women over 40. And I think now it's getting a little bit better. Hopefully it will.
Marcy Goldman, tell us what it was like going to school on the MGM lot. What was a typical school day like?
Oh, I just wanted to make one comment about the women older. I think a lot of them who've been very smart, that are working and are still doing pictures, produce them themselves. They either become directors or they produce their own movies. And that is a way out of the age problem. So I just wanted to say that. Excuse me, would you ask me that question again?
From Marcy Goldman, tell us what it was like going to school on the MGM lot. What was a typical school day like?
Well, school was very important. As I said before, you could not work at the studio unless you passed your grades. And it taught you a wonderful way to concentrate, because many times you'd have to go to school on the set, and you had the little school, it was only cardboard practically, set up on the set, and while your stand-in went in and stood under the lights. Plus, another thing I want to, they think child stars don't have really anybody their age on the set. There's always another little girl, or if it's a boy actor, another little boy on the set with you, because one is standing under the lights, and they look like you, dress like you, and they do the lighting while you're going to school. Then when I do the shooting, they go to school. So you always have another companion. And when you're not in the scene, either you're lighting stand-in and you can play, or, we'd play hopscotch or jump rope or whatever. But you learn concentration, because they could be banging sets, pulling down sets, and you had to still concentrate on your schoolwork. So it taught you wonderful concentration. Even today, when I have to do a television show or an appearance or a talk, I learned that with the television on, or a radio going, or people talking. I can't do it in a silent room. But it's wonderful because I can kind of learn anywhere. And I used to learn a lot of my plays on the plane or, when people were around. So it is very good. It's very good teaching you the concentration.
We're in the James Cagney room here.
Yes.
And one of the things that we didn't cover is that you did a short film for World War II with James Cagney, where you recited the Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and which has become very famous.
Yes, well, this was one of my very favorites that I ever did. Mervyn LeRoy directed, and James Cagney played my father, and Ann Sothern was the mother. But it starts out with an American family, and he's the air raid warden on the street, and he's thinking back of what it would be like if his child would be in the war. So I played a Russian child in the bombings. I played Chinese. I played Czechoslovakian. I played a child in the concentration camps. I played a child in France, in the underground in France. So I played all the different children of all the different nations during the war. And then it came back how happy he was that, he was in the United States and his child was safe. He runs back to the house and his child is safe and is coming down the stairs. So that was one of the most challenging and one of my favorite roles to play.
And where did Lincoln's Gettysburg Address come in?
Well, then he comes into the house and he's just seen all these children in the war-torn countries. He comes home and I'm coming down the stairs with my mother, who's Ann Sothern, and I said, "Oh, Daddy, I learned something today in school," and it was the Gettysburg Address, and I'm reciting that for him. And he's so thankful that, I'm safe and in the United States and at home. So.
And then when you did public appearances, you would then recite it.
I would recite the Gettysburg Address. And then also, as a child, I was sailing to England for an appearance, and I was on the Queen Mary. And I was on with Gene Simmons and Mrs. Roosevelt. And it was a very rough voyage, and everybody was ill on the ship, including my mother, except me and Mrs. Roosevelt. So Mrs. Roosevelt said to my mother, "Don't worry, I will take her in to dinner." So it was just, I think there was one other couple, and Mrs. Roosevelt and I in this great big dining room on the Queen Mary having dinner. And then after that, we became very good friends, and she invited me to the White House, and I became the March of Dimes girl for Mrs. Roosevelt. And Mr. Roosevelt had written this wonderful poem that he had written about America, and he gave me permission to do it. So I also did that along with the Gettysburg Address at many appearances.
Do you remember the poem?
Slice. I haven't said it in many, many years. I don't know if I'll remember it, though. I don't know if I should try it or not.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to forget it. But one day I will come and do it for you. But it's been many years since I've done it. But that was just a wonderful, wonderful experience, being at the White House. And Mrs. Roosevelt was a very kind, wonderful lady. And I was very proud to be the March of Dimes girl and did raise a lot for the March of Dimes. So that was one of my charities, one of my big charities as a child.
From Delno Eby. With today's highly competitive acting field, would you encourage a child to pursue a career in acting or wait until they're old enough to handle it?
Well, it's a hard question, but if I had a daughter and she really wanted to do it, I don't see any reason for stopping her artistic development if it's all handled correctly and handled right. And she's taught, like I was taught, that it may not be forever. And just because you go in for an audition, I was very lucky as a child. The only audition I had to go in for was Journey for Margaret. And I'm not one that's for auditions or like auditions, but I know they're a big part of the industry. and they're difficult, and they can be very sad for some people. But I think you have to tell your child that just because they don't get the part doesn't mean they weren't good. There could be many, many different reasons you don't get the part having read at that audition. It could be that the actor they're looking at or they're picking, it could be hair color. They don't want too blondes, or they don't want too dark-haired, or you don't seem to go with that other actor they're picking. Has nothing to do with your reading. So you have to pursue and go back again. You can't give up just because you don't get that one role, because it has nothing to do with you. Nothing. It doesn't say that you did a bad job. And it's a difficult, and that's something, thank goodness, I didn't have to do a lot of, but is an important part of the business today, and something that you have to study and learn how to go in and do an audition. Doesn't mean you're a bad actress if you are not good at auditions. That may just not be your forte, but unfortunately today you have to kind of get around that a bit. So,
Okay, this is a two-parter, but it's not related. First part, where did you lose the pin from Barrymore? Which beach?
Santa Monica, of course. I lived in a wonderful place called the Del Mar Beach Club. And my mother and I had a wonderful apartment there. And I love the water. So we lived there for a while. In fact, Elizabeth and her mother came there for a while too and stayed. And for a while it was not a hotel or a beach club anymore, and now it's a club again. And I was there not too long ago, and it's beautiful as ever. So that's where I lost the pin.
And then the second part, as an actress of Spanish descent, would you consider yourself as one of the first women of Latino descent to win an Oscar?
Well, when I was little, the studio pushed the Irish, and also because I did Journey for Margaret, which was a British child, they would bring in Latin actors, but it was really not in at the time. So they sort of, in fact, they told my mother not to speak Spanish to me. They didn't want me to have an accent. They didn't want me to have too much of the culture, which I think was really bad.
So you weren't bilingual?
Well, I am to an extent. I understand everything, but I've learned since, having lived in Peru and so forth. But Latin actors were not really, it was very, very difficult. They'd have a few, stereotype, but as a rule, it was not in. And I think that's something that's changed today, and I think that's wonderful. And so for the first time, I could really get up and talk more about my Latin heritage, because I did receive an award from the Latin Awards, and I was just so happy with that, because I think that's all changed now. And I think that's very important, that a lot of the Latin actors really have come into their own, the singers and the dancers and the, because that was very difficult. Well, even as a flamenco dancer, you were definitely only could play so many clubs. You would only be in so many. My mother and my aunt were one of the few who broke away and played at the Waldorf and played at the Fontainebleau in Miami. So again, my mother was sort of a pioneer starting, because they didn't have a lot of Latin performers. But somehow they got in, and my aunt played all of the top hotels all around the United States. So I was kind of happy about that.
This is from Desiree. I've admired you for a long time. Would you please share a story of the making of Little Women?
Well, Little Women, I was so thrilled to do Little Women. I was very fortunate to be able to do movies of my favorite books. What other business can you play the character of your favorite books? Because I love to read, and I loved Jane Eyre, I loved Secret Garden, Little Women. And so I was thrilled when I had a chance to play in all three movies. And of course I loved, Elizabeth was always so sweet to me, and I loved playing with all of her animals. So I couldn't wait to do Little Women. And I loved the costumes. I always loved the history, and I loved the historical costumes. And Walter Plunkett did the costumes in Little Women. Wish I had some of those now. And the costumes in Jane Eyre were absolutely beautiful. As a matter of fact, I just read in the new auction book that's going to be auctioned, they're auctioning my dress from Jane Eyre. And in those days, we didn't know to keep some of our wardrobe, but I read where that's going for like $8,000. So, no. My mother, the only thing my mother...
should give it to her.
They don't give those away today. But my mother, the one outfit my mother did keep was the red coat from Meet Me in St. Louis. And it didn't go really with the decor of my bedroom. I wish I'd had the white hat. I'm looking for the white hat because that goes with my Victorian decor in my shabby chic bedroom. But the red coat didn't go. So Michael Jackson wanted it. He bought that. So he has the candy kitchen and the red coat.
Speaking of auctions, there's a story about your Oscar, about how a housekeeper stole it, and then years later it turned up. You want to share that?
Well, you never really realize sometimes that you can get back a lost treasure. You never give, as I say, you never give up in this business, and you never give up on something that you have lost. Because when I was about 10 years old, we had a maid that was cleaning some of the Oscars and different things, and somehow she didn't come back, and all these things went with her. And I don't think she ever stole it because she never sold it or anything, but
she borrowed it for a long time.
She borrowed it for a very long time. So that Oscar was gone until about 6 years ago. And the Academy did give me a duplicate, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't, it was just, I thought, a made-up one. So I really didn't pay much attention to the duplicate. Never thought I'd ever get this back. Well, these two auctioneers were going to the Rose Bowl antique shop, show, and they saw this little vendor with this Oscar, and they'd seen him several times, and they thought it was a phony. Everybody passed it by. And then they went back again. They said, maybe this is real. So they bought it for like $50. And they found out it was real. And then they were going to auction it off. And they already had a bidder for like $150,000 for this Oscar. But the Academy is like a detective on Oscars. They have their sort of detectives out looking for lost Oscars. And this is a rare one, because there's not many child Oscars originals left. And so they happened to come across this book, this auction book, and called the auctioneers, who were not very happy about the whole thing, told them they couldn't sell this Oscar. So, of course, the Academy has their lawyers, and I guess you don't fight with the Academy's lawyers. And they came, and the auctioneers had to relinquish the Oscar back to me. And so I had my Oscar back, which I was very thrilled. So this Oscar has really been through a lot. Oprah Winfrey was doing a show on lost treasures about 2 years ago, and she asked if I would bring the Oscar on the show. So my dear friend Randy helped carry the Oscar to the show. And as he was handing it to Oprah, who was looking at it, as she was going to display it on the show, they both dropped it. So now it has a big dent in its head. So it's a little battered and bruised, but it's still there, and it is the original.
Great.
So.
This is from Darlene Carden. Do you feel you missed out on any part of your childhood due to your career? Any regrets? And then she states, how talented and believable you were.
Thank you. No, as I said, I don't feel that I've lost out on anything. If I had to change anything, I would keep it exactly the same, because I've had a wonderful life. Of course, I'm the type of person that kind of enjoys life. Things don't bother me for very long, so I get over things fast. So I'm lucky that way. I'm sort of like Shirley Jones, I guess, that enjoys everything and nothing gets too tragic. So I'm fortunate that way. I'm easygoing.
From Bud Watson, as a child, who was the most intimidating actor or actress you worked with?
Wallace Beery.
Okay.
Definitely Wallace Beery.
And the opposite from Kelly Tager, which actor, if any, have you enjoyed working with the most and why?
Well, I work with so many wonderful actors. I really can't say. I mean, how do you pick between Jimmy Durante, Lionel Barrymore, Robert Young, Charles Lawton, Edward Arnold, Orson Welles? Because Orson Welles, we weren't as close as I was to some of the others, but he was very nice to me. He was wonderful. The only thing that got a little tiring was that he took a lot of takes. He would take like 30 takes on one line sometimes, and that got a little tiring, but he was nice. He was very, very sweet to me. So it's very hard to choose. I have to say it's hard to choose. I think one of my favorite women I worked with was, of course, I loved all the people in Little Women, and we're still very good friends. So I have to say that all the Little Women, little older women now, but still Little Women, and Judy Garland. So,
from Marcy Goldman, each time I see Jane Eyre, I'm constantly amazed by your knowledge of French and your accent. What training were you given for the film, and did you ever keep up the French? You were absolutely delightful.
Thank you. They had a French tutor on the set, and I can pick up languages very easily and accents very easily. So that wasn't too hard. But no, I wish I had. I would love to have kept up with the French, but I didn't. And I feel sorry about that now.
From Barbara Condon, who is your favorite screenplay author, and what role are you dying to play that you haven't done yet?
Oh, I think it's hard to say who's my favorite screenplay. I love Our Vines of Tender Grapes, written by Dalton Trumbo, and I've loved all of the things that he has written. So I think he's one of my favorites. And a role that I haven't played yet. That's kind of hard to say. I think you're always looking for a good script, and good scripts are hard to find. And the one thing I hope that they never do is try to remake Meet Me in St. Louis. So I'll be happy, even if I find another great script again, I'll be happy if they don't try to remake that one.
I agree with you. From Stig, did you get up to mischief on the set? Any anecdotes?
I would get up to mischief from time to time. I was a pretty good person. I didn't get into too much trouble. I remember, though, that Mary Astor got a little upset with me on Meet Me in St. Louis because we were doing the dinner scene. And I would keep eating all the food, the prop food, and then they'd have to reset it all again. So she said kind of, oh, can't we get on with this? It's getting a little tiresome, Margaret. You're so little, you have such a big appetite. And then, of course, when I was making the film with Sophia, I got into trouble because I loved her eyes. And the makeup man, to make them more slanty, she wore a wig, and they'd take her hair, and it was kind of painful, but for beauty, why not? And they'd tie her hair with a rubber band, and it would pull your eyes up more like that. Well, I wanted to have eyes like hers, and I got the makeup man to do the same for me. Well, she caught me, and she said, "Your eyes are up." And I said, "Well, I want my eyes up." And she and I argued back and forth, and Miss Heckart, who was a wonderful actress who played my mother, said, "Eyes up, eyes down, let's just get on with this movie." So I took them half down, and after that, we were friends again, Sophia and I. So.
Are you still involved with the FHS Legacy Corporation?
Yes, I do some of that, but mainly I've been so tied up with the AIDS Foundation that I haven't had too much time for anything else. So,
do you want to explain a little bit about what that is? and does?
This was the Sacramento AIDS, and they have some wonderful, this is where some of our very best doctors are up in Sacramento, and have really, they were the people who first took care of Rock Hudson, the doctor that I had worked with on the projects. And they've made, of course, such great progress now. But it's still out there. And I think young people have to be very aware and still be very careful, because it's still widespread around young people. And it, even though we have a lot of the medicines, it's still a very difficult life if you do get it. So I try to warn people, to be careful and to, learn about what they can do and get all the information on it that they can. And then I have done, some things for Elizabeth. If she couldn't, make an appearance, I did something for her not too long ago. So any way I can help. And of course, she's the one that started, all of the awareness, and has done such a wonderful job and devoted her life to it, that I thought that, if I can help in any way, that I certainly would try the best I can.
This is from Melody. Were you always treated right by agents, managers, parents, studio folks? Any stories, good or bad?
Well, I was always treated very well. I have to say I was treated very well. It was just, there was one time after Meet Me in St. Louis, I loved the red dress that Judy wore in the ballroom scene. So when I finished the movie, Judy had one copy, just like that red ball gown, and I would wear it all around the studio. I mean, people were getting sick of me seeing that. I wore that, and I was also Belle's star. Jean Turney is Belle's star, and I had the guns and the dress and everything. So for my birthday, Mr. Mayor wanted to give me a birthday present. I was about 8, and he gave me this horse. And my mother, incidentally, loved going to the races, and that was very in then. All the movie stars would go to Del Mar, and it was a lot of fun. And so I got this racehorse, and I was just thrilled, because I had seen National Velvet, and I was, all into the horses. So Mr. Mayor said, this is your horse, and you can come out on your birthday and see this horse run. Of course, he never thought the horse would win. Well, the horse started to win, so he wanted to take it back. And my mother was so mad, and I started to cry and everything. So he said, well, I was going to make you take back that red velvet dress, but now you can wear it anywhere you want. So I conceded and gave him back the horse as long as I could have it, and my Bell Star guns. So that was sort of that little bit of mischief. More on Mr. Mayor than on me.
From Edwin McCready. What are the biggest changes you have experienced as your child career entered adulthood? What obstacles, if any?
Well, I think change is always wonderful, and I always enjoyed change. As I say, going into the theater. Also, I got interested in other things, too. I love archaeology. I probably would have been that, if not a dancer. And so I was always interested in something. So even if I wasn't working, it was never a big tragedy. But luckily, I would always get that next job down the road. So I've always been pretty lucky that way.
From Max Valentine. Where is the Hesse building on Sunset?
You can't miss it. It's right like in the middle of Sunset, and it's beautiful. It's sort of an Art Deco style building with glass, the little cubicles of glass. You can't miss it. And it looks exactly the same, and I've often wondered if somebody kept it that way or if it was within his family. And he was very famous at the time. He shot many of the famous stars. He was married to a beautiful actress and model, and was very, very famous and did many, many magazine covers. And I think a lot of stars really started through him, modeling for him and so forth. But I've often wondered who owns the building, and it's never been torn down or changed. And I've never seen any offices in there. It's always just sitting there by itself, just like it was.
Also,
it's a little bit of history.
Also from Max, what kind of exercise do you do? You look wonderful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've had my ups and downs. Actresses always have to worry about their weight. And when I gain a little, I love sushi, so I go on my sushi diet and climb stairs. That's mainly what I do.
Climb stairs?
Mm-hmm.
From Virginia Morrison, who have been your favorite directors to work with, and what are some of the memorable things you've learned as a result of working with them?
I loved working with George Cukor. He was absolutely wonderful to work with, and I learned so much from him. And also I loved working with Mervyn LeRoy. He was a great director and did so many movies that I love. And of course, I was fascinated with George Cukor because he had also really coached Vivien Leigh for Gone with the Wind. So, I was just in awe of him. And as a matter of fact, also, I guess a lot of people don't realize, but in that movie that I made with Anthony Quinn, that was with Anthony Quinn, Sophia Loren, and Raymond Navarro, who was a very famous silent film star, who also had a speaking part in that movie. So it was interesting talking with him because he came from an era that I didn't know. So that was a really fun movie to work on, and I learned a lot.
From Michael, in the movie Meet Me in St. Louis, how did you get all those tears and emotions up for the snowman scene?
I just told you that. So that was thank you to June Ellison. And we're still good friends, by the way, because she was also my big sister in Little Women. So.
From Ellen Mabey, who are some of your literary and musical inspirations?
Oh, I think that, of course, I always loved the Latin music and flamenco, and that's my culture that I grew up with. And as a little kid, I remember seeing Rita Hayworth. I'm one of the few people that have a picture of Rita when she was like 14, and very Spanish, with the Spanish spit curls. And she wrote on the letter, to the Flores sisters, it's wonderful dancing with you. And that was my mother. They were known as the Flores sisters. And so that's really a bit of nostalgia that I have at home.
And from Aria Curzon, do you have a best and or worst experience you could share with us from your years as a child star?
I don't really have a lot of really bad experiences as a child star. I enjoyed really everything. I think I was a little apprehensive when because I really wanted to do Meet Me in St. Louis because I always loved doing the costume films. And when I know she was, having a little tete-a-tete with Mr. Mayer, I was a little bit worried I might not do that film. But I was very happy that all worked out. And then when I did Unfinished Dance, they had another little girl who was going to double for me in the dancing, not realizing I was a dancer. So I kind of fought for that and said, well, I can do this. I can do all the ballet and everything. And so they let me do all my own dancing. So that was wonderful. I loved doing that. The only thing they kind of didn't let me do that I thought might have been fun, I did do my own singing in Meet Me in St. Louis, but I did get dubbed in one of the other movies I did, because my singing voice was not up to par, I must say. But that's something I always would have loved to have done, is been able to sing. But I think you have to go with the talent that you have. So I was happy I was able to do the dancing, but I sort of gave up on the singing. So left that to somebody else.
Now, this you've sort of answered, but a lot of people have asked the same question. What was it like working with Judy Garland?
Working with Judy Garland was a wonderful experience. As I said, she was very happy during that movie, and she was very lovely with children. She loved children, and I was like her little sister. That's why the relationship worked on screen. If it hadn't been that way, I don't think the Meet Me in St. Louis would have been the classic that it has become today. And we all loved each other. We all got along. Leon Ames was just wonderful, just like my father in the movie. And Tom Drake, he was really the boy next door. And so I think working with Judy was just a really great experience. And she was such a nice person, even when the movie was over. Judy never forgot to say hello if we saw each other and we were out and she was busy or we were in a crowd. She'd always say, hello, Margaret, how is everything going with you? And Vincent Minnelli was also a very kind, wonderful person. And I'm very fond of Liza, too. Liza's a great gal. And so they were a wonderful family. And so everything I saw in Judy was positive and wonderful. And I'm so glad that I worked with her at that very happy time in her life.
Now, when you were 20 years old, Life magazine did a cover story about you growing up. And in looking at that, I was amazed at the resemblance to Elizabeth Taylor. Do you think that hurt you?
Sometimes I think so, because whenever I'd go out, or a lot of times even going to a do, they'd think it was Elizabeth. And I think because we did look so much alike as I got older,
especially
always,
in that layout.
Yes, and especially in that layout,
right.
And at that time. That always hurts, I think, a little bit. So maybe a bit, but of course I was very flattered and I loved Elizabeth. But I was happy with the way my career was going, so I never resented that. So I'm very fond of Elizabeth today, and I think she's a wonderful person. So if there was anybody I had to look like, I would have picked Elizabeth. So thank you, Elizabeth. And I don't resent that at all, no, even though it might have hurt a little bit.
Was it good being Margaret O'Brien?
I loved being Margaret O'Brien, and I was happy with myself. I was happy with my family and with the career and my days at MGM. I'm very fortunate to have had those days at MGM, because in those days, I must say the studio knew how to make you a household name. And today it's very difficult to keep that name, even though maybe some of us haven't done a film in many years. People do still know us. And all of those movies, thanks to Turner, that are all new fans out there. So yes, that was a wonderful time to be at MGM, and it was a very exciting time to be in the movies. I think it's more difficult today. I mean, I think it's more worrisome today, and I think it's more fleeting today. So we were very lucky that we had a career, that MGM kept our name out there, that would last us through the years when we were working or not working. So I do have Mr. Mayer to thank for that. He was a very great head of a studio. He was the king at MGM. You don't have those kings anymore. I remember when we would be at the commissary, you'd have Lana Turner, Hedy Lamarr, Clark Gable, and when Mr. Mayer would walk through to his private dining room, we'd all stop eating and get up and turn our heads and sort of bow to Mr. Mayer, and that's the way it went there. But he did see that we had the glamour and the excitement of being a movie star, and he did make movie stars. So my hats are off to the studio heads of yesterday. So,
do you watch the movies, the old movies?
I watch the old movies plus the new movies.
No,
I
but
don't
do you
think
watch yourself?
No.
No.
No. I had never seen myself on screen as a child because I felt
Never?
No.
You didn't see
Not
Whitney
until
and St.
later.
Louis?
Not until later, no. Because, and I'll tell you why, I felt I did my job, I worked hard on the film, I knew the story, and I wanted to see somebody else in the movies. I wanted to see another performer. I didn't want to be stuck in my movies, in myself. I wanted to learn from other performers, and I think that's very important today, too. In fact, talking to young people, I find that a lot of young people don't know the history of this business. don't know the history of movies. They don't know who Greta Garbo was. They don't know who Jean Harlow, well, they know Jean Harlow, but they don't know Raymond Navarro. They don't know some of those great actors, Mary Pickford of yesterday. And I think you have to know and see all those films up until today. Plus you have to go to all the new films to see some great acting. And I go to some of the video shops and I find some great films that are not the big money makers, that aren't in the big theaters, that are wonderful films, that have some wonderful actors in them, some wonderful films that are made in Canada, some wonderful films in other countries. And I think it's important to pull all these films off the shelves, the ones from the 20s up until today, and some of the ones that are the smaller, wonderful art films. And I think you have to see them all in order to learn to be an actress. And you take a little bit from each actor and each actor, and you kind of put that in your memory bank. And not to copy, but to just take a little bit of inflection, a little bit in that line. And that's how you learn, and how you watch how the different directors, the wonderful directors, directed all these wonderful movies. So I find that sometimes the young people today, they just get stalemated in what is that film that was out this month. And I don't think you should do that. And the way to learn, not all through acting school, is by getting out and doing theater also. Unfortunately, when I was growing up, they had the stock companies and they had apprentices and so forth. You don't have this so much. You have it in England, but you don't have it here. And I'd love to see more of that get started, because that's a wonderful way of learning through live audiences and doing a little bit of everything. You can't just get stuck on acting school and auditions and going to movies. You have to get out and you have to do it. Even if you only play a bit part, one line, you can see what the other actors are doing on stage. So that's sort of my little bit of advice. And now I'll be quiet. And you do it the best way you think.
Well, I think the thing that all of us come away with after spending time with you is that not only did you survive stardom, but you came out as an actress. And we're so pleased that you shared so much of yourself with us tonight. Thank you for being an inspiration to every child.
Thank you so much. Thank you.